Kyne. 5 minutes remaining.
The Freedom of Information Bill, I think, should rightfully be renamed the Freedom of Information Restoration Bill because it aims to restore the legislation's position prior to its curtailment by the Fianna Fáil Progressive Democrat government of 2002 to 2007. Nevertheless, the bill before us now actually goes further than the 97 bill to provide a new consolidated freedom of information framework. I've previously made use of Freedom of Information Acts to ask questions about processes and procedures of the Department of Social and Family Affairs, those are then known. And the Act was the only real and substantive manner of securing information in the IT system, for example, underpinning the social welfare system. It was information which I believed was of interest to any citizen concerned on how taxpayers' funding was being spent by the Department, and it revealed that several social welfare schemes were administered using a computer program that was nearly 20 years old and had been created for use on the visual display units, VDUs, and not on PCs. And to the best of my knowledge, that system is still in place today. My experience is one of the freedom of information in the public interest as distinct from personal requests for information held by public bodies. Both are equally valid, but one difference, which I believe this bill ought to introduce. There should be no fees for requests for personal information. When first enacted in 1997, the Freedom of Information legislation represented a significant departure from the historical norm in Ireland. It's fair to say that government, and as we know now, other large and powerful institutions were troubled little by transparency and openness. Without doubt, the isolation experienced in the 1930s, 1940s and 50s created a very inward-looking administration with a suspicion of openness of public decision-making and deliberating. Our membership of the EEC radically altered mindsets in this area and in so many other areas. And gradually, freedom of information became a necessity, not an optional extra. Similarly, the Irish people began to demand answers and explanations to a variety of issues. It became unacceptable for administrators, representatives, civil servants, amongst others, to provide meaningless or scant answers with little or no explanation of the reasoning underpinning them. In this context, the 1997 Act was transformative and was hugely welcome. However, the circumstances surrounding the decision to curtail the 1997 Act in 2002 and 2003 are themselves worthy of freedom of information requests. Certainly, government must have the ability to govern, to debate, to reason and to deliberate independently. That is democracy. The government cannot and should not have to govern through the pages of newspapers or the web pages of social media. The concern that cabinet records could become available under the FOI Act was genuine. And the response, however, in the FOI Amendment Act of 2003 was disproportionate and I believe went against the spirit of the original Act. This new Freedom of Information Bill achieves a number of important objectives. It reverses many of the objectionable amendments made in 2003. It extends the scope of the FOI Act to a significant number of public bodies previously excluded, including Garda Síochána, the National Treasury Management Agency, the National Assets Management Agency, the Central Bank, the Education and Training Boards, and the Refugee Applications Tribunal. It extends the scope of the FOI Acts to non-public bodies which receive significant funding from the state, and that is, of course, a very welcome development, as state funding is, after all, public money. Whilst this bill contains very important and positive measures, I believe that the objective of all public bodies, and indeed any organisation providing service to the public, should be maximum transparency and openness. We should aim for a reduction in the number of FOI requests, not as secrecy or suspicion, but because our government departments, state agencies and public bodies are more open and transparent, more willing to provide information from the outset. Whilst there are many naysayers and detractors, we can already see the positive effects brought about by a new approach to Dáil business. This bill has been subject to the new pre-legislative scrutiny, which opens up consultation and brings in stakeholders at the earliest possible stage of lawmaking. The report compiled by the Oireachtas Finance, Public Expenditure and Reform Committee demonstrates the input of a wide range of interested parties from across society. Finally, I think it's apt to note the interaction between this bill and parliamentary questions. In a sense, parliamentary questions are freedom of information requests in some way. In my experience, PQs, while it's much maligned over costs, are invaluable to seeking answers and information in a timely manner. I've learned from my time in the House that just as with FOI requests, the effectiveness and usefulness of a PQ depends very much on the contents of the question. The exemption of draft PQs and parliamentary briefings from FOI requests is important, but must be considered with the fact that all PQs are published within hours of their delivery. In conclusion, I welcome this bill for a variety of reasons: for promoting openness and transparency, for promoting better access to information in the first place, and for restoring, as committed in the programme for government, Ireland's freedom of information laws.